My name is Andy Kuzhenko. I lead a team called Data and Analytics at the MTA. Among other things, we're responsible for the MTA's open data program, and Lisa Fiedler from my team runs that, and she's here on the call with us. Today, we're talking about a slightly niche subject, maybe, of establishing a central data function. This is something that I felt a number of years ago that the MTA really needed, and I'll explain why. And so for the last 4 years, we've been going about building that here and have had, I think, some decent amount of success. We've faced a bunch of challenges. We've overcome some of them. Still a lot left to do here, but we'll kind of talk about, for those who are interested in maybe replicating something like this at your own agencies or changing something about how you work in your organization, maybe this is going to be helpful. It's a little strange for me to present anything without a lot of like charts and graphs and pictures, but this is going to be, as I said, a bit more of a niche thing and more just like talking in words than like new data to share here. This is about like how you get the data, not the data itself. Anyways, I'll dive in a sec, but just one thing on housekeeping. If you could put any questions you have in the chat, I'd be happy to take them like in real time. But I think Lisa will be monitoring the chat and we'll just read them out. Otherwise, I'll leave time for Q&A at the end. Okay. So just briefly, what we'll talk about, like what is a central data team? What's the purpose of that? To zoom out for just a second, like what does it mean to manage from data? That's like a term that everybody says they're doing or they want to do, right? They want to make data-based decisions. Like what does it actually mean in practice to do that? This is the kind of thing that like I'm sure you guys all do in your day-to-day work all the time, but just to think for a second what that looks like. I'll give you a brief history of like how the DNA team, as we call it here, came to be. But then most of the talk, I said the last 3/4 of it, will be like specific. There's 8 kind of lessons learned that I wrote down, and we'll go through each of those, and then we'll leave time at the end for Q&A. Okay, so why bother doing this at all? One of the things that a central data team can do is to manage a central data repository for analysts at your organization. I don't know where you're all from or how your organizations are laid out with respect to analytics, but from the MTA experience, it was very siloed, broken up. Different applications came along over the years in the last few decades. Databases were set up and teams there uses what I kind of call a very local model for doing analytics, right? So if you wanted to know about bus maintenance, I'm going to use all MTA examples. Hopefully you're in buses and trains. If you want to know about bus maintenance, you ask the guy who managed the bus maintenance database, and that's how you did analytics. And he would give you data to do your work. But that's not a very easy way to go about things, especially if you're like from budget or from a strategy group or from some place that's outside of that function. It's very hard to get the data. A central data team can make it easy to do that. You want to provide a platform for people to do their queries. Some people have pretty good tools in their part of the business. Some people have very weak tools, and a central data team can provide a single good set of tools for everybody. Obviously, establishing what people call a single source of truth. People talk about how that's so important, but it actually takes some work to do that. And a central data team can do that. Can say, this is the data, this is the right metric, this is the way to calculate it. You use this one. Don't do your own thing. You can establish guidelines for working with data. You can model best practices. There's some people in an organization who are really good and cutting edge with what they're doing. Some people are doing more basic things, and some people are doing odd things sometimes. And you can show, for this set of metrics that we're responsible for, we do it this way. We encourage everybody to do it this way. You can promote a good culture based on sharing and transparency. It really doesn't work to be a central data team if you're not going to be sharing your data. That's the whole point. But that's not always easy in an organization to get people to share. And so you can model that practice. Communicate frequently. So in our case, we do quarterly meetings. We have a Teams group that we post on all the time to like really try to tell positive stories, to encourage good work being done outside of our team, the organization, things that are being done like what we would consider the right way. We want to show people like it's easy to do things this way and it makes your life easier. The topic of data governance comes up a lot. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute, but like you can start to, as you get more experience with how your organization works and what doesn't, you can start to, if your organization doesn't yet have a policy on data governance, you can come up with one that would work. Data governance is the kind of thing that's hard to draft in a vacuum. I think a lot of people are tempted to do that. But once you've gotten some experience about how this might work at your organization, it's easier to come up with something that will fit. You can improve productivity of folks around your organization, not just in your own team. You can upskill folks with tutorials and office hours is something that we do quite a bit of. Promote new and better analytics tools. Like most people have Excel or maybe Power BI, and those tools are fine, but there's a lot of other things that you can do and you can show that they work, bring them on board, test them out yourself, and then release them in the organization generally, and then do tutorials on how to use them. One that's big at the MTA, there's a lot of like legacy manual reporting pipelines, like people creating the same report that they give to their bosses for years. A lot of those things can be easily just automated and let that analyst go do something else, try to improve the numbers as opposed to just produce them. So that's kind of like why I think this is worth doing, and what I felt the MTA needed behind each of those bullet points that I shared is a problem that we had that I was trying to address. So anyway, this idea of managing from data, this is like the most galaxy brain part of the talk, but just bear with me for a second. So what does it actually mean in practice to manage from data? Every company, every organization has many data sources for the different things that you do. From those data sources, you want to pull out insights, obviously, so that you understand the company better, understand the problems you're having, opportunities, things that you might want to do. From those insights, presumably somebody is making decisions about what we should change or what we should try. And then eventually those decisions, I have to move this little box here. Sorry, my own screen is being hidden. Hopefully those decisions lead to some positive change happening in the company, like in the actual like field or whatever the front line would represent in your agency. And then if a change occurs, presumably that is reflected back in the data sources. So like to take an example, maybe there's like a budget overrun at your company and you dig into the budget data or some other data source and you find out what seems to be askew. Managers make a decision of like how to change some policy to stop that from happening. That gets sent to the front line managers there, implement that change. And like the next quarter, you can see like the budget, the actuals went down. Something like that is how that would work in practice. But like in every example, you're hoping for something like this to occur. And then you can say you're really managing from data. And then the question is, we have names for each of these parts. Going from decisions made, presumably by like execs or managers, to change in the field would be like the operations, at least that's what we call it here at the MTA. That would be like subway managers, managers of bus depots, et cetera. Moving from insights to decisions, of course, is management, right? They understand the problem, hopefully as well as they can, and they make the best decisions they can. The first part, moving from data sources to insights, I would call analytics, right? So these are kind of obvious terms. But I think the idea is like to operate well as a thing, to be a good manager is a thing. Like analytics is its own discipline, and we should strive to be, as analysts, as people who work with data, as good at that as we would be for any other discipline, whether it's engineering or something else. So to zoom in for 1 second on analytics, to think of it as its own discipline, there's certain steps you do, and you don't even think about these probably because you're just doing them all the time as a matter of course. But to do any kind of like analytical work, you need data. You need to extract data out of some source, right? And that could be that you have direct access to a database, you're working off a data lake, or maybe somebody just like emails you a CSV and you don't really know where it comes from, but that's your data source. And you got some raw data out of it. You need to like clean it, make sense of it, understand what rows and columns you need, how you're going to aggregate it to do your work, whatever it is. And then once you have a good working data set, you have to actually answer that question. How am I going to transform this data into what you could call information, or something that's like where different analytical questions can be answered very easily from that table or set of tables that you have. And then maybe that's the last step, or typically you might want to like then visualize that into a PowerPoint or a Power BI or some kind of dashboard that has a line chart or bar chart or something that kind of like shows like, here's what's interesting about this, here's where this number is trending, here's why it moved the way it did. And then finally, typically you're going to go to a meeting or you're going to email that link to the dashboard. You're going to share that visual, that data insight with somebody who's in a position to make a decision. And I think once you've done all these steps, you can say like you fully did the analytics process and you're doing your job as an analyst. The reason, again, I know this is all very obvious. The reason I just broke this out like this is if you think about it, most of this, if not all of this, could be set up in a way that's automated, right? The data extraction, the cleaning, the transformation, setting up a refreshing dashboard. Somebody checks it every morning if that's their line of business. Like all this can be pretty much automated throughout the whole thing. And the value of essential data teams that you can start to do this for people so that we can get out of the business of creating these numbers and more about helping people manage from them. So how does that work in practice? Again, this is a very cartoon level thing. There's an analyst on the right-hand side, and you have these raw operational data sources. These are separated on the page for a reason, because at least in my experience, working as an analyst here at MTA, as an analyst, you are not anywhere necessarily close to the data that you need, right? You are being asked to do a lot of things. You're being asked to maybe create public metrics. We just had board meetings yesterday and on Monday. Maybe as an analyst, you're asked to produce something that's going to be read to the board and to the public. Maybe you're asked to work on some internal dashboard to help someone manage a problem. Maybe there's a kind of an ad hoc query. There's like a request from the press or somebody, maybe a politician who needs a number really quickly, and you're asked to work on that. But then you face this gulf, right, of how do I actually do any of this stuff? If you're not someone who has direct access to all the databases you need, you have to find someone who does. And that can be really hard, right? Analysts don't typically have logins to all the databases they need at their company. something that you would expect like IT or maybe your vendors have if the data is stored with them. So where a central data team can help, of course, is like fill in this gap in the middle. And the idea is that we will work with analysts, find out what they need, make the connections to these databases, do that extraction, cleaning, transformation, work with subject matter experts to surface on the data lake a automated refreshing table that is like clean and ready to go. It's not raw, it's documented to make really nice like analyst ready tables available so the analysts can increasingly stop thinking about like, where does this data come from? How do I get it? Who do I talk to give me access? And they can just search the central data lake. There's a catalog for it. And they can find what they need. They'll come to know the tables they need, they use most frequently, and they just go about their business. So the analyst is basically starting further to the right on this diagram, like the data they need is right there, as opposed to having to go all the way to the left and be like, what data does this company even have in this topic? We don't need to have everyone here be like an amateur data engineer, right? You can be an analyst or a data scientist. Okay. Lisa, just a note, I'm not looking at the chat, so if there's a question, just feel free to interrupt because I'm not probably going to see it. Okay, so just like where my team came from here. So I started the MTA almost 12 years ago. And for most of this time, I was working as a head of a strategy group at New York City Transit, which is New York City Transit's the subway bus kind of biggest part of the MTA, but it's not the whole MTA. And then in 2021, somebody retired and they had been running what you might call a big data performance reporting unit. They did all the ridership stats and fare evasion and subway OT on-time performance and bus stats. They legitimately were doing big data and had data pipelines set up. And that person retired and that group was placed under me. And for all the years before then, I found the MTA to be, frankly, a pretty frustrating place to do analysis. Managers and execs had like high expectations as they do in any company, but like the road was not cleared for you at all to get any of that kind of work done. And so analysts were getting burned out and not being supported, I didn't think. So anyway, like when I inherited this other group, I got to look at their data pipelines and started to learn more about how that works and realized that wasn't set up very well. It was set up in a very old-fashioned way. A lot of what we call cron jobs on virtual machines, things tucked under somebody's desk is where that metric lived and where it's calculated, and just all sorts of like odd practices like that and like really old infrastructure and just, yeah, a lot of bad practices. No security practices of any kind. No tech debt was ever reduced. It was just like on to the next project and keep that one running, and people coming in at 4 a.m. to kick off some process and fix something, and a lot of manual fixes to what should be automated work. Anyway, so I realized in all this, there's an opportunity to use the responsibilities I had from this new group and reporting on key public metrics, like things that the MTA could not release, right? Like we had a burning platform, so to speak, of a real problem that we had to change this, or else we'd be at risk of not putting out numbers that were legally required to share. And so I was able to make that case to the execs here, give me a few extra headcount to try to sort this out because the guy who retired left me in a lurch here. And then, it didn't take a lot of creativity to realize if we could fix this, get this current process we have on a modern platform, something cloud-based, nothing from this old team was in the cloud, it was all here on premises. If we could do that, figure out a way to set these up, these like key MTA metrics as proper data pipelines in a modern sense of the word. Data is data. If it works for these source tables, why wouldn't work for every other one? And so from the get-go, the goal was not just to fix our local problem, but to set up a general platform that like anybody could use and that we could start to share with other groups and bring in their data, not just the ones that we needed. And so using that idea, I did some rebranding and all sorts of things and convinced people to let me start this team, which was notional for a while. I and other people on my team were calling it this, but it took a while for this to catch on. But the team MTA Data Analytics was announced in January of 22. So it's been just over 4 years since we put ourselves into business there. And we're placed, and we still are within the Strategic Initiatives Department at MTA headquarters. So I moved the team from New York City Transit to headquarters, partly as a way to announce, like, I'm not just here working on like subways and bus stuff, but like the railroads, bridges and tunnels, the other MTA agencies can also work with us, and we're here to support them too, which was novel for a department to offer that. And then, as Lisa knows, Lisa came to work right around this time on our team, and the open data program, that responsibility for managing that was placed under us in mid 2022. So a few months after our team started. Not to brag too much, but I did want to point out some recent successes we've had. Most of the work we do is internal and doesn't see the light of day, but we do manage the open data program and the MTA's metric site, metrics.mt.info. And some of those things, of course, then end up making news articles. So we recently, it's starting to top I shouldn't say recently, because I guess it was last January. So like a year and a few months ago, congestion pricing started in New York City, and our team managed the data reporting from that. And we put a lot of that in open data, and it was ready, if not on day one, like a week or two after, maybe it was 3 weeks after the program launched. We had a data pipeline set up to share daily data at 9 a.m. the next day of like how many people crossed and so on, each of the different crossings in New York City. And that, as you might recall, that program was really under fire for a while. Different people were trying to kill it. And I think having good data that showed the impact of the program right away on either bus speeds or reduced entries into Manhattan was, if not critical, it was instrumental, I'd say, or very important in defending that program. We defined a new Jamaica on-time performance metric, working with Long Island Railroad to do that. It's gone up to help people make connections at Jamaica, because after Grand Central Madison opened, we were hearing complaints that it was hard to make new transfers. And so we helped them develop a metric to help them do better at that. And more recently, we released data on Able Aces, something Lisa worked on. Able Ace is our camera enforcement, automated camera enforcement for our buses to give tickets to people who are clogging bus lanes. And somebody at Streetsblog wrote an article about that based on our open data. So there are some things that are starting to get out there more and more, which is great. Okay, so I'll kind of not zip through these, but I'll go through this a little bit faster here. There's 8 of these lessons learned, and I'll just go through them now. So I think, I guess when you're doing anything, but maybe especially when you're starting a central data team, to have a clear idea of what the problem actually is exactly. I say that just because I think it's tempting to be like, yeah, we want new tech. We have old tech. We want new tech. But there should be a problem, right? We should be able to tell people the problem at our company is this. And if we do X, Y, and Z, we'll be able to fix that. For the MTA, I'll go into what that problem was in a second. But keep in mind that like wherever you are in the org, other people, they're either kind of people closer to the front line than you, or maybe closer to the CEO or the executive level than you, are going to experience this problem in different ways, right? And so you got to think about how that looks like. I would go through I had a PowerPoint, a pretty long PowerPoint, 20 pages or so, different versions of it, different selections of pages for different audiences. I would walk around to colleagues and get their thoughts. I found that people like to complain about things that don't work well at their job. And so it was very easy to find additional content to put in there and organize to come up with a really well fleshed out set of problems of what the issue with data was at the MTA. For us, there were no shared data facilities. It was one of the raw sources and other silos that had been set up mostly within IT. They were like kind of data stewards who governed access to these, and you had to convince them you needed to do your job. They would say you have data owner approval, but they weren't really, you weren't sure who the data owner was that had to approve. It was just such a mess to try to get data around here. And then the tools we had, eventually they'd be like, okay, you have access, but I don't have a way to run queries. Only IT could do that. And so they'd ask you what your business was. They'd write a query for you or set up a view that you could download from. But basically you're working in Excel, maybe Power BI eventually, but most of this was like, they'll give you data you can work with in Excel, which I probably don't need to convince the folks in this call. It's not really enough for modern data work these days. Second one is that you do need to build some executive support. At some point, you're going to need some resources and money to do this, maybe some extra headcount, maybe a cloud subscription. And to do that, you need to convince the execs. And so it's worth understanding what this problem looks like from the executive level. And the issue is that execs generally aren't the ones who work with data themselves. Like they're asking questions and getting answers. And so for the exec, they're not frustrated by not being able to get data access, right? Because they're not trying to get data access like the analysts who work for them are. Their frustration might be something more like, why does it take so long to get an answer around here? I asked you about this 3 weeks ago. I thought you'd email me back right away with an answer. But in those 3 weeks, you were arguing with somebody in IT or another business to give you data so you could put in Excel. If that's your process, the exec probably has some inkling. Or maybe you're constantly asking them to like clear hurdles for you to get access to data to answer their question. Like that kind of stuff gets tedious for them too. So highlight those things. They might also get like different numbers, like they're hearing one thing from one analyst, another from a different manager. Like there are signs of dysfunction that an exec will pick up on even if they're not experiencing them like directly. People like things with a positive ROI, right? And so if you do need to ask for some headcount or some money for a US or Azure subscription, you should say, yeah, there's a small investment, but I think we're going to be really able to do X, Y, and Z that will be improved around here and they'll make it worth it. And I had definitely an exec level version of that PowerPoint that I was walking around. I had a middle manager one, an analyst one, and an exec one. So if I saw someone in an elevator and started chatting with them, it was very easy to say, oh, let's talk later today about this. And I would have the PowerPoint ready to go. I didn't need to make something new. Third thing is to build the function centrally. A lot of times, like you might Maybe you're a manager of a group like I used to have, which was I had my responsibilities for the subway and bus performance numbers and a handful of others. And it's tempting to look at your own team and your own process and say, oh, these aren't very good. They're very frustrating. They're error prone. Sometimes they don't work, and I almost don't make the deadline to get my numbers in, or whatever the problem is. It's very tempting just to be like, I'm going to fix my own shop, which is great. And that's what managers are supposed to do. But if you want to create a central data team, you have to think about how you're going to do that in a way that would help everybody else. And so for me, I think it was a good decision, in fact, like a necessary decision, to move the team from New York City Transit, which again is one of the MTA agencies, to the MTA headquarters level, because the headquarters at our company, at least, is acknowledged to be cross-agency. It has a lot of support functions, HR, budget, IT would all be at headquarters. And so it makes a lot more sense if you want to work generally to be here. And so you should do the same thing within your companies. I did some rebranding. My team used to be called something else, and now we call ourselves Data and Analytics. It's not the most creative name, but I think it like pretty accurately describes what it is we do. And so I think it's a good idea. You may be in the IT department of your organization already. If you're not, I would suggest you partner with IT. Again, just borrowing from my own experience here, there's a tendency, or there was an MTA for people who wanted to do different data work than IT was willing to support, to go it alone, right? And that was in the team that I inherited, that was definitely the strategy, was to keep IT away so they can get their work done, right? And I think it's that expression, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. I think that applies here, that it might be a little bit frustrating at first to work with IT, especially if you see your IT department as maybe part of the problem. But I found my allies within our IT department, people who recognized this needed to change and were helpful. We got a little bit of the budget came from the execs, but we got the permission to start our own Azure subscription. Our IT department is much more comfortable with Microsoft than the other cloud providers. So we got an Azure subscription and some budget to start doing it. The budget we needed was so small compared to their other budget. That wasn't a big deal, but they were supportive about our initial needs. Very likely, if you're doing the kind of thing we did, you'll want to use some open source packages and different tools. IT will need to clear all those. And so you might as well have a good relationship with them if you want to be doing new things at your agency. Again, because you're a central data team, you want to promote sharing and transparency. But I think in particular, it's important if there are people outside of IT doing IT-like things, at the very least, you need to let them monitor what you're doing and how, in whatever way they want. And so from day one, we agreed and told IT we'd be 100% transparent about everything we're doing. They can monitor us in whatever way they want. They can be on the same subscription, et cetera. This one is really key, and one that was a little bit obvious at first, but it became a lot more clear as time went on about defining clear roles, especially data engineering. And we now have a few different roles on the team, which has, again, evolved over time. But I think where we started was that everybody was an analyst. In fact, it was even worse than that. There's a whole smorgasbord of different titles that can do analytical work at MTA. In our team, we had some of every kind, but different people were doing different similar things within that grouping. But the problem though is that if you give an analyst a job if you have a smart analyst, somebody who's pretty clever and determined to do their work well, and you say, produce this number every day or every week, if they're smart, they're going to say, this is tedious and I don't want to do this way anymore. They'll find a way with whatever tools they have or tools they know. Maybe they do something in Excel with a macro or a Power Query from Excel, or they do something in Power BI using a CSV that they get from an email and they copy into a folder the same way every day. They try to minimize the tedious parts of their job naturally, right? Maybe they can write a Python notebook and they do that. And so they come in every day to refresh the cells in the Python notebook at 5 a.m. every Monday or something like that. Basically what I'm trying to say is if you don't have any data engineering platform or tools, people will start doing their own data engineering. People who are not data engineers will set up kind of bad ways of doing their work. And you can't blame them because it's tedious and they don't want to work that way. I do think that data engineers are really the only extra headcount you need to start this kind of team. Again, if you're like the MTA, like every company has analysts, like people who can work with data once it's provided. What they don't have is people who are willing to step away from the content and what the data means and just make sure the data is delivered, making sure that it lands every day at the right time, that things don't break, to automate things thoughtfully with an eye towards the future and all sorts of stuff. But that's the kind of thing that analysts don't do. They get it working once and then we'll keep that running forever. So I mentioned we have a few different roles that the analyst has broken out into. The first thing that we realized we needed was to make a true data engineering role on the team, right? So that some people could be analysts and some people could be data engineers. And so that was like the first role we defined. And for all these roles, we defined a manager version of that job description, and then levels 1, 2, 3 for individual contributors or ICs under that role. So we have a manager data engineering role, and we have data engineer 1, 2, 3, increasingly senior positions under them. Since then, we've moved on to have a level above manager called director and a IC level 4 for these jobs. We started with just manager and 1, 2, 3. More recently, we started a role called analytics engineering, which is more for those like first two steps of that analytics pipeline I mentioned called extract and clean. They're the ones who like work with IT or vendors to make the connections to these raw sources, understand what tables are in there that are needed for the analytical work that's desired to happen, extract those tables, clean them up, do some basic documentation of what they mean, and then basically stop there and make sure those appear in the data lake. I'm not sure I've even really mentioned the data lake at this point. I guess I did with that one cloud diagram. But we do maintain a data lake. It has, I don't know how many thousands of tables in it at this point. But that data lake is a central product of our team that contains all the data and transformations and all the pipelines land there. And so the data engineers basically support that platform, making sure that everything on it works, that all the code fits together and all the connections are made between MTA and Azure and the Airflow library and everything. And then the analytics engineers are the ones who are writing code. We use Airflow for our data orchestration. So it's a lot of Airflow jobs to make sure the data is extracted on whatever schedule, the transformations happen, the data is documented, all that stuff. Lastly, we have the data scientists whose job would be closest to the original analyst job description. But given that we have these other roles now, I think the data scientists, the work they do now is quite a bit different than what the analysts did before. The data scientists still code quite a bit. They also write Airflow scripts, but usually towards the end of that pipeline. So more on the transformation step, like taking that cleaned up information or cleaned up data and creating what I was calling information before. And then also doing like cool visualizations and things that are like helpful. They're the ones who are like most business oriented. Like they'll be working with buses here at MTA or subway maintenance or whatever it is to understand what the problem they're having and make sure like that answer comes out of the data into a chart that's helpful for them. And so that's how we define these terms. I know they're a little bit different depending on if you Google them or talk to somebody else, but that is how we define these terms in our team. Okay, I think it's important. This one I don't think I realized until after it was over. And some of our first projects we chose wisely by accident, other ones we didn't. I'll only talk about here the successes and not the failures. But I think a good way to pick your initial projects, if you've stood up a central data team, you've done some of this other stuff I've talked about, and now you're open for business, you want to take on some projects, like your first one should be like easy enough to understand. It's tempting to want to do something really complicated, some like really cool modeling, data science thing, and knock everybody's socks off. But at least at the MTA, I think most of the work we have to do here is pretty simple. There is some complicated stuff to do, and I'm proud to say we do some of those. But a lot of what we do is a lot of metrics are just averages or percents, rates, sums, whatever counts. It's not always super complicated. It's, I think, better for your initial projects to be easy for others to understand. Good if they're highly visible, right? Like in our case, we were lucky at first. I didn't think of it as lucky because we had these metrics pipelines that barely worked. But we did have highly visible ones like Subway's on-time performance. That is like the first thing talked about at our board meetings. And for the MTA, one of the top 2 or 3 metrics, ridership was another one. That's probably the most important metric that the MTA talks about and tracks. So it's good if those are the ones that go on your data lake because people can dig into those. Speaking of digging in, if they're based on large data sets, we have 4.5 million riders in the subway a day, like 1.2 to 1.5 on bus. So we're talking about 6 million rows of data to make that data set show up on the data lake every day so that people can dig into how is Omni usage at this station last month versus some other one, and they can figure out where to put their promotional materials to get people to move to Omni as an example. That kind of making that kind of thing possible throughout the organization is very useful and shows the value of what you're trying to do. And I would just say avoid sensitive data, at least initially. That just adds a whole nother wrinkle. Some people will be like, oh, I want to study employee overtime by cause in this department, and I need names in the report so I can talk to this manager about why he's getting so much overtime. That is important analysis and needs to be done, but I would not try to tackle that first because doing analyses like that just makes everything a lot more complicated. As I mentioned, we inherited a bunch of these metrics that were top of mind for a lot of people. So that was a kind of a lucky break. Another way of thinking about that in terms of your own organizations might be if you're already a group like my old one was, where you have some really critical reporting that you're already responsible for doing, that might be a good group to transform into a central data team because you're already doing some of the work right now. The question is, can we just do this really well and then offer that service to all the other groups at your organization? So 7 out of 8, we're almost at the end anyway. Definitely, I think it's worth thinking about things in terms of 80-20, as they say, where you can get 80% of the value of something with 20% of the effort. What are the easy wins or the low-hanging fruit, whatever the metaphor is, and try to meet that need, because most of the company doesn't need to do, as I said, super complicated things. They need to do relatively simple things with like big data sets, right? So yeah, decide what your offering is going to be and stick to that. There'll be a lot of people, once they see, oh, you're doing something new and useful here, can we add a bunch of features to what you're doing and things that you're not quite ready to do? Just say, not yet. We'll get to that. But for us, we might need to update this page. I think we're moving a little bit beyond this. I guess it's still true today. Our main thing is next day data, right? Data from, like, today is the 26th. So all of our data sets on the data lake should have data through the 25th, through yesterday, through midnight this morning. We're starting to get into like real-time data sets. That was one of the things that people asked for that we weren't ready from on day one. And like only now, several years into this, are we like, okay, let's start talking about real-time data. The other one being PII, or sensitive data of various kinds. One thing on this note, this comes up a lot, like how to work with sensitive data. So at least for the first like year or so, I think we just said we won't, right? And I think that actually saved us a lot of, we said we won't because we didn't really have a good way of doing it. We could just throw the sensitive data in the same part of the data lake as non-sensitive data. That wouldn't have been wise, right? And it would worry people about what we were doing if we didn't show any kind of regard for that. So I don't think it's good to just ignore any of those like protocols that are there for a reason. But at the same time, like if you try to do something fancy to create data governance rules on the fly as people ask you for this and they want their data protected this way and someone else wants something else, I think you'll just waste a lot of time, at least at the MTA, and I'm guessing at most public agencies. A lot of the data that's analytically useful is not sensitive. Now, I'm speaking for myself, and maybe that's not true at your agency, but a public agency has to have different rules for what really makes something sensitive. And where a train or bus is at a certain time is not PII. There's no personal information. There's nothing really particularly sensitive about that. Bus or subway work orders for results of inspections and what work needs to be done to fix them. Again, not PII. Most of the stuff here is not. Now, we do have some PII in terms of why an employee called out sick or who worked whose overtime or whatever, for what reason. And that kind of thing we did not initially put on the data lake, and I think it saved us a lot of grief. Yeah, I guess as I've just made this point, I've heard a lot of groups who are trying to start a team like this basically start by saying, what are our data governance policies going to be? They haven't built anything at this point. They're still in the situation where they have like siloed data in all their different sub-agencies and departments. And I guess before maybe anybody's gonna be willing to share data with the central group, they're like, how's my data gonna be safe? They want a whole data governance solution. We definitely did not do that. And I think, hard to recall now if that was like intentional or just the way we did it. But I think looking back, at least, that was wise. I think way better to get something working with non-sensitive data and basically let early adopters come to you. Once people see, whoa, you have a much better solution for doing this than like me chaining together 9 Python notebooks that an intern refreshes at 5 a.m. If I can just have my Power BI that I made for my boss refresh automatically off your data lake, let me know how to do that. I want that. Much easier just to progress that way than to try to like please somebody with like very specific concerns about their sensitive data. Okay, last one is to be strategic about the projects that you do and don't take on. Your team will probably be small to begin with until this catches on. And you can't, once you've demonstrated the value of this, presumably you're going to get more interest in your team working on things than you have resources or time to do, especially early on. And so you can afford to be a little bit choosy about what projects you do. Again, I don't know how much of this I was conscious of when I was doing it, but looking back, I think these were what made for the good decisions that we did make. I think if the project is going to be more visible, if you're working on some very obscure data set in your company that not a lot of people know about or care about, that's not going to do much for you in terms of establishing the central data team. And conversely, like you do need to do some like tech debt reduction projects. Those are important, right? Because if you keep just adding to, if you know there's some flaws in how you do things, that's going to take you a few weeks of an engineer's time to fix them versus like use that same person's time to keep building new things. Eventually I'll catch up with you. And so you have to be wise about like how to tackle new things versus tech debt. with colleagues or parts of the company, if you've been at that company for a while and know people and know certain areas, it'll be much easier to work in those areas. But if that's all you ever do, you won't venture into new parts of the company with whole new data sources you've never touched and new people that you can help out, right? And saying one's good or bad, but you shouldn't probably be doing all of one or the other. This one is obvious in retrospect, but because we had a lot more like requests for data sets to create for people than we had resources to do them, we could be a little bit choosy. And oftentimes, like an exec would ask us to go into some area to prepare a new report or data set in that area. And then we go into that area and the person would be very resistant. The actual business owner of that area did not want to share any data, did not want to really cooperate. That ended up happening less than I worried it would when I started out. But when that happened, I would just tell the exec, like, oh, not cooperating. And they'd say, can we escalate? Can we do this or that? And I'd be like, go ahead. But I refused to waste my folks' time hitting our heads against the wall in an area where people didn't want to work when we had a long list of projects to get through, presumably with more cooperative partners. So I just would get to those later. Maybe the person will come around once they see all the other work you're doing. Okay, that's about on time. We have 10 minutes or so for Q&A if there are any questions. But that's it. Those are lessons learned. Hopefully that was somewhat interesting or helpful. I'd love to hear any questions if anybody has any.
Yeah, we've got a lot in the chat, so I'm just going to start going through with the ones that have a lot of reactions to them.
Okay.
So we've got a question from Kenneth about how did you generate buy-in to break people out of silos into a more centralized process, especially when people have entrenched workflows and specific ways they like to manage their data and work.
Yeah. So I guess there's two ways to get like kind of top down and bottom up. Top down would be like the CEO tells so-and-so owner of a silo, you have to do this with your data. You have to give it to this new team. We tried that in our own way. That was like hard to do, but we had a memo sent out. We call it the memo. And it was like something we worked on for a while. And then she got sent out that was essentially saying, here's this new team. They're here to work with data. If they come to you to ingest your data into the data lake, you should cooperate with them. That's what it said in short. I don't think that was actually very effective, to be honest. Most people felt comfortable ignoring that if they felt they had a good reason for not sharing it, whether it was a good reason or not, in my view. So the top-down approach, at least here for us, didn't work that well. The bottom-up approach was more successful. And I think I just said this a minute ago, like if someone's not being cooperative, move on to the next person. And I think we stayed busy for the first like a year and a half, I'd say, just by putting our own stuff that we're already responsible for on the data lake and then letting people know it was there, that they could use it too, right? You don't have to wait for us to do every ridership analysis or subway on-time performance analysis or bus bunching, whatever it is. Like today is all here, go use it. And that was very effective. And it got the word out. So people were coming to us like that first year or so. There's a lot of what I called early adopters coming to us. And I think that's a lot better. I would just stay busy with all of that first. And eventually the execs will see what you're doing. People realize, oh, in this department, they don't waste time like we do on this. Like we want that too. And it just built from there. I think that's a lot easier than building demand for it as opposed to insisting that people give it to you.
We've got a few questions here that I'll combine into one. There's some rumors about MTA's dependency on the mainframe that I guess are publicly available. And then just general questions about if you could speak more to our process of transitioning to cloud-based infrastructure, because it seems like there's just hesitance around government leadership in general about moving to the cloud.
I can answer the second one first. I had talked about this, but we inherited a team that had a lot of on-prem, a lot of pipelines built from on-prem databases. And when we stood up this new version of the team, we started from the cloud. We were starting in 2022, and right, so we had no intention of building on-prem at that point, right? And our IT department had already dabbled with cloud offerings and doing some things with AWS and Azure, and so we just asked for our own Azure subscription that they could see to and they could be on, and just started building pipelines onto there. So I guess maybe somebody else at the MTA already tackled the general nervousness about moving to the cloud, because by the time we were doing that, nobody was really trying to stop us from doing that. It's 2026. Like I think the cloud thing is pretty well established, and whoever is saying that they can't, the NSA stores things on the cloud. I'm not sure what public agency here is dealing with stuff that's even more sensitive that can't go there. And so I'm not sure what to say to that at this point. The first question was about the mainframe. What is that, Lisa? What was that person referring to?
Just that someone heard that the mainframe was an important source of data for our team. And if you talk about the process of moving off the mainframe and the unique constraints.
Oh, Yesterday, I did a presentation for the MTA board where I did mention a mainframe that our MetroCard data was stored on. That mainframe will continue working until the last MetroCard swipe at some point later this year. And then I think it'll be turned off. We have taken all the data off of it and we're taking more every day from whatever remaining swipes are still out there. But there's a couple other mainframes I'm aware of, but there's not many, obviously, at this point. That's very an old way of doing things. Yeah, the mainframes are still functioning, but they're going away. And obviously, no one's building any new ones here.
We've got a question from Steven, which I think is a good one to explain a bit how the data lake is set up. He's asking, do you have a layer of abstraction for your data lake that less technical analysts can use to pull the necessary data that they need?
Not really. So the overall architecture of the data lake, we use zones for the time being. We might move to something maybe more granular in the future. But the main one is called the core zone. It's literally called core, C-O-R-E. And then there's, I don't know, a dozen what we call restricted zones that are by topic. So like safety, legal, people, like HR data, et cetera. We don't have one for each individual agency. There's no subway zone or Metro North zone or anything like that. And so we try to have as much data as possible into core, but it has to be like non-PII, non-sensitive. And so all the core data is like basically open internally to a wide array of MTA analysts. Like it doesn't take a lot to get access to core. You just need to basically work here and be an analyst or manager. And so that's the goal, is to make sure everything that can be in core goes into core.
I think maybe related to that, someone's asking about the tools that our team uses for reporting and maybe just like the MTA generally.
Yes. The second part of the question was like, is there an easier version of the data lake with like more aggregated data or smaller data converted in Excel? The answer to that is basically no. But what we do is we do a lot of SQL tutorials to show people how with a few lines of SQL and a little bit of understanding what's in the table, you can download the data yourself into Excel and work there if you want to. But in general, I think the data lake has been more popular among people who know Power BI or SQL or Python, and they're doing those kind of analyses. Anyway, so like we are looking into a tool. Lisa has been looking into using CCAN which is a package. I'm not super familiar with it yet. I'm just learning along with everyone else, but like that might be a way for some of the smaller data sets to allow people to be like, well, just give me last month's data and it's 100,000 rows, and they just download that into Excel and they have what they need. So that might be a good solution to this. I think maybe like the message here is once you have something like a data lake and it's organized in the cloud, you can do a lot of different things with it. And so it's easier to bring in other tools that could be good ones for users that are not programmers to use. So we haven't developed that yet, but I think that's coming soon.
I think one thing I'll add is a lot of people just use our open data portal. If they're not a technical user, they can just pull the data from the New York State Open Data Portal like any of you all could.
Right.
Okay, maybe we have time for one or two more questions. Question from Gabe. How does your team maintain business rules and how are these enforced, especially when data is shared with other groups who may risk misinterpreting the data?
Basically, I'd say we don't worry about it, which I don't mean that in a flippant way, but again, the goal is to put as much as possible in the core and eventually to open data. So a lot of this is to prove first to ourselves internally at the MTA, we can be a lot more transparent within our company about this data. We've been doing this now for a few years, and knock on wood, but like nothing bad has happened, right? And we don't intend for anything bad to happen. We're pretty careful about what ends up in core. There's a risk that somebody from a different department or something is going to look at someone else's data and calculate something incorrectly, and I guess send something to the boss saying, look at how poor their performance is. That hasn't happened. Like that's a pretty malicious thing to do, honestly, and not really a realistic thing to actually happen. Someone might calculate something incorrectly, like by mistake, but I think the way to educate people is to document the data really well, to explain like this is how you use it, to show example queries of how you calculate things, to create like internal dashboards that already have the number someone needs, so they're not tempted to or forced to create the number themselves and make their own assumptions. So that is an issue that we hear from people when we say we'd like to ingest your data into data lake because there's something people want to use it for. I think we often hear, are they going to misinterpret it? How about you interpret it correctly and we'll help you build a dashboard or a metric that shows the correct interpretation, so that's not a concern. And that's usually enough to convince people to go ahead.
Great. And then I'll ask these two questions at once because I think they're related as our last one. So when trying to justify your team to leaders on return on investment terms, what kind of arguments or metrics did you find most effective? And then I think similar to that, Richie is asking if you have any suggestions for people working on like a similar data integration, data lake process, but are having problems convincing tech conservative executives who lack
Yeah.
motivation?
So I think the main thing is that the I of the ROI isn't that big, right? So I would say the extra headcount we asked for was basically 5 people. And so the MTA is a big company. Maybe the agencies you're at are the same size, maybe they're smaller. But for a company the size of the MTA, it was 5. And the 5 are really just our data engineering team. All the data scientist roles we have in analytics engineering, those are basically all converted analysts or people who are in analyst roles who resigned and I hired them back as data scientists. The only role we didn't have before was the data engineers. And so 5 people in the scheme of a company of this size is pretty small. I think you could, and we built everything ourselves, we use a lot of open source. If you went for more of a vendor solution, maybe you could get by with 2 or 3 data engineers, but you do need someone who has done this before. Our head of data engineering, a guy named Mike Kutzma, is very good. I probably should have made a bigger point of this during the presentation. Hiring someone really good for that role was a huge benefit for us. But anyway, in terms of the return, that's what the case I was trying to make in that PowerPoint, right? These are all the things that you get executives. You should be getting clearer answers. You should be getting a lot more reports. We can be more transparent with the good stories we have to tell about our performance, not just the bad stories. Figure out what it is the executives that your company are having trouble with and say that you think you can fix it for them with this. They can just give you 3 or 4 headcount. And I think our initial Azure cost was like $10,000 a year. It was something trivial. It's now higher than that, of course, but it's not a huge investment to get started. Feel free to reach out on LinkedIn or through our open data, the email address you see there if you have any further questions, or if you'd like to talk more about how to do this at your particular agency, I'd be happy to do that.